Welcome to episode 2, talking about trend lines in the last video. So this chart might look familiar to you. We spoke about horizontal levels of support and resistance. So trend lines work pretty well with this in the sense that they really are like levels of support and resistance, but just in diagonals, and we call these trend lines. So looking at the guide, you would have understood what trend lines are. They're similar to support and resistance in the fact that they help us identify the direction of a trend and give us an idea of where the future price of a coin may be headed, as the guide says. So what we're doing is, and really everything that we spoke about in horizontal support and resistance applies to this. So we're using it exactly in the same way. If we draw if we draw our trend lines on the bottom of the candles, we're looking obviously as levels of support. If we're drawing them on top of the candles, we're looking at them as levels of resistance adds. So let's draw in our first diagonal trend line. And the same rules apply as well, where you would use your trend lines just like what ads is doing, whether it be on the weekly, like we did in our previous video, to find very high quality, very significant levels of support or resistance, and then come down to the daily and do the same thing again. So same rules apply in the sense that we're using 2 to 3 touches of a trend line. For myself, probably more so 2 touches of a trend line to signify that that is a confirmed trend line. And then the more touches that we eventually get, we look for weakening of that trend or that trend line. And then we look to see if we're going to get continuations of bounces from a trend line, or if we're going to break through that potential trend line. So looking at what we've got here, and this is why it's so important to use this with something like support and resistance, because as we start to approach previous levels of support or resistance along with a trend line, you can see this sort of triangle formation that we have as we approached this bottom level of support. So as has got drawn in, perfect. So that's where things start getting very, very interesting, because as we start approaching these levels of support or resistance, and the space between the horizontal and the trend line gets tighter, it signifies that there's going to be some upcoming moves, or that we really should be paying attention, because we're looking for weakening of that now what has become the resistance level. And then it helps us to identify zones. We go through this, what was previously support, which has now become resistance with this trend line. We go bang straight up to that other level of resistance, and then we come back down. And if you extend that trend line across ads, look at how it lines up sort of very closely in the future with that level of resistance. So we get this trend line becomes tagged, and then as we head up towards a level of support or resistance in this case, it adds that double layer of resistance. We've now got trend line support, or we've got trend line resistance, and we've also got horizontal support or horizontal resistance. So as those trend lines marry up with those levels, they become quite significant. At least in my case, anyway, when I start trading them, I pay a lot of attention to that. So let's have a look now at what would be a level of resistance through a trend line ads.
Absolutely. We'll have a look at the chart, and there's probably one obvious one that I can see right now, which is this one, and you could probably see how
That's perfect.
Those line up quite well. So if we zoom into this portion of the chart, we've got obviously multitude of touches to confirm, broke through, retested that zone, that trend line again, and then to confirm that move to the upside there, Ty. So
that example that we've used here is almost exactly the same as the one that we have in our guide. So what's really important to notice is, see on that second touch of that trend line, we broke through it, and then we rejected, we didn't retest, and we bounced straight back through that for a pretty significant sell-off there. So what's really important to take note of is, just because we break through a trend line, that doesn't always mean that the action is going to be to the upside or to the downside, depending on what way you've broken through that. So it goes back to that last video that we recorded, where we said that you might want to wait for the preceding candle to close, especially on the 4 hour or the smaller time frames, And if we go right to the very, very end there, ads where we broke and retested that trend line, that's another reason why you might want to wait. So you could certainly jump on it. If you jump on a break of a trend line and then it continues up, but you start seeing some weakness, you might want to then sort of sell out of that position and wait till it retests that diagonal trend line before you make a decision on whether we're bullish or bearish. And you can sort of see there as well. There would be another pretty clear horizontal, right there, right where you've got your pretty much right there where so you could put in your level of horizontal support, and that would marry up quite well.
Pretty much here-ish. Even if you drag it all the way across, you can see it.
Yeah, and that's perfect. So, and what's really valuable about that there is that you see that we've broken through that diagonal, and then we did get a retest of that the first time, but we've gone up and we've headbutted that resistance perfectly. And then even from there adds as well, though, that sort of that green wick that we've got around maybe the 18th or 19th of October.
Oh, okay.
So if you go down to the bottom of that, there's sort of a nice little level of support there as well. If we look left all the way back to sort of April 2017, perfect. So that's how marrying up trend lines and horizontals can work. And we're doing this on the fly right now. You can see we broke through that trend line resistance. We headbutted resistance. We came back down and we nipped trend line and horizontal support and then continued back up. So that's how you can use that. And again, marrying that up with RSI, where it sort of it bottomed a little bit and then it sort of V reversed, and we indicated that we still had a little bit of room to move to the upside. Steamroller did the same thing. So you've got trend line resistance or trend line support, you've got horizontal support, you've got our indicators saying, hey, there's more room for upside, and you've got price action and a nice bullish engulfing candle off that trend line and that little bit of resistance there. So there's a lot of things there saying to you, hey, this is a zone where we might look for an entry or an exit. So using just those three alone, you've got a pretty decent little strategy on your hand. So as we said beforehand and in our guide, buying and selling breakouts, you've always got to be careful of that sort of stuff, and you can time your entries really well based on levels of confluence there. So angles is probably something that we need to talk about too, ads, when it comes to identifying trend lines. So with trend lines, we want to see consistent sort of 45 degrees, really, I guess, the bread and butter angle for a trend line. We don't want to see really sharp trend lines because it indicates that trend is probably pretty weak, and we've got parabolic moves or very aggressive moves to the upside, where the trend is probably less likely to be respected multiple times than what it would had you had a beautiful 45 degree sort of trend line.
You can see the difference totally where you try and draw trend lines on parabolic moves, either upside or downside, compared to the difference that you get with a decent 45 degree angle there. The resistance or the respected, the level of respectedness, that's a new word. But the level that it is respected completely changes. Something like this is okay, but looking like I tried to do before, obviously on purpose, but something like that, or even something like that, is not going to be as accurate, and you shouldn't be basing trades off something like that.
Yeah, exactly right. So the points to remember, or the major points to remember with horizontals and trend lines, is that the more times the trend is sort of touched after that second or third, it is a strong trend, but you got to start paying attention when you get multiple touches of there. You got to start paying more attention the more times it's touched. It takes a couple of times, 2 to 3 touches to really validate a trend, whether it be horizontals or trend lines. Focus on those major swing points as well when it marries up with your horizontal support or resistance. And don't force the trend lines. You can connect wicks or bodies, and you can do a combination of the both, or you can just do wicks or just do bodies. As you continue trading and seeing how this market works out, you will see that you will start to see similarities across how trend lines and how resistance or support levels are respected. And you've just got to continue trading and watching the charts to see how price action acts around those significant levels. So as always, head over to unitytradinggroup.com, come into the Discord and ask all the questions that you want to ask about all this sort of stuff. That's exactly what we're here to do, help you along your trading journey. And we will see you in video 3.
Catch you there.